I know I'm a decade too late to the party, but I finally watched The Great Gatsby. This was, of course, released in 2013, very nearly 10 years ago, directed by Baz Luhrmann and written by Baz Luhrmann and Craig Pearce, obviously based on the novel by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I will say right now, I haven't read the novel. I may read the novel at some point. It's not at the top of my to read list, but I did find the narrative in this to be relatively interesting, so I'm kind of curious to see how it compares. However, if you'd like to share your thoughts about how it compares to the novel without spoiling anything, please feel free to do that. I would be very interested to know how much of this is exactly like the source material. I'm not going to spoil anything about the narrative in this video or discussion, so if you haven't seen the film, I won't ruin it, but I will say if you haven't seen it, definitely give it a watch. My only real complaint, and I'll get my two kind of main complaints out of the way, there are two things. One, it's just far too long. And there are a lot of things that could have been cut down. There are a lot of scenes that ran on for too long. There were a couple of scenes that I thought were maybe not that important, didn't really add much to the narrative or our understanding of the characters' motives. This definitely did not need to be over 2 hours in length. At the same time, time goes by quite quickly, so it's not the end of the world that it's that long. If I had seen this in the cinema though, and you were asking me to sit still for 2.5 hours, don't know if I would have survived. The other issue, and it's not a big issue, it's not something that I had much of a problem with, but I did find that sometimes Gatsby's behaviour wasn't that believable. Now he's a very extravagant, eccentric, fascinating character, and I'll talk more about him in a moment. So his actions and his behaviours are quite outside of the norm anyway, and that's fine, it's part of his character. But sometimes I felt like his motivations didn't feel quite right. Sometimes I feel like decisions he was making would not really have fitted in with the rest of his personality or the personality that we are given. And I don't know if that's exactly what it's like in the novel, or if the film has decided to take certain creative liberties, and sometimes Gatsby's actions just don't feel right. And I don't mean they don't feel realistic to true life, because he's a pretty unrealistic individual. He represents, well, he represents the ideal that a lot of us want, but he is wanting something else. And it's kind of basically saying you can't have everything. You could have this wealth of riches, but will you get the girl you want? And obviously, his actions are quite extravagant, but sometimes I feel like his behaviours aren't quite in keeping with his personality, or indeed with what any human would do. But that aside, I really enjoyed the character actually. Gatsby as a character I thought was brilliant. If you're unaware of what this is about this self made millionaire, Mr. Gatsby, J. Gatsby, and he, on the face of it, has everything. He throws these colossal parties where he's basically an absent host, and he dresses fantastically, and he can afford whatever he wants. But he also wants Daisy, played by Carey Mulligan. Gatsby is, of course, played by Leonardo DiCaprio. Will he be able to get the girl? This is somebody with whom he has past history. So it's not just an absent chasing of infatuation. There's history there. We slowly learn about how she feels about Gatsby. It's not immediately obvious what happened with their relationship, and then we are told, and then I kind of feel like, okay, where's the narrative going from here? And there are, again, certain times where I feel like Gatsby's behaviour just wasn't realistic. It's not what somebody would do to try and resolve various problems. Again, somebody can argue that Gatsby is not exactly your average typical person, but at the same time, I still don't believe a lot of his actions, and that's something that I have a problem with. Not so much of a problem that I couldn't enjoy the film, but I just felt like sometimes his motivations weren't really very believable. His actions were not the best thing he could have done. There were better solutions to various problems that cropped up along the way. So, and he's quite an intelligent character. He's an intelligent individual. So you'd assume he would have seen these more appropriate, suitable, intelligent problem-solving solutions. I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking too much into it. The narrative itself, I thought, was up and down. Sometimes I thought it was really fascinating. Sometimes I thought it was not very well executed. The concept is very fascinating, though. Gatsby as a character I found to be Very interesting. But what worked for me the most, and the reason why I think this is a phenomenal film, because the narrative is a bit messy sometimes, it isn't perfect. Again, don't know if that's based on the novel or if it's some creative liberties they've taken with this, and they just haven't really fine tuned it enough, and they've kind of padded it out with too much fluff as well. But the visual quality of this film is remarkable. The cinematography is some of the best work I have ever seen. And yes, sitting 2.5 hours through this in the cinema would have been a nightmare for me. But to see this on the big screen would have been a treat. Because it is just visually stunning. The party scenes are colossal, and everything seems synchronized and choreographed and blocked down to the last second. Everything is compelling. The lighting is amazing. The color choices are fabulous. There's a scene relatively early into it, I think maybe about half an hour into it, and everything with Gatsby's flamboyant and brightly coloured, and he is waiting. How do I say this? He's waiting for somebody to arrive. I won't say any more. And all around him, he has these flowers and plants, and then there's a cake stand with macarons on it and cupcakes, and there's so many bright colours and vivid images, and everything's just stunning to look at. And I think it's very well shot, very well directed. Everything is beautiful about it visually. So even when the narrative is questionable, and I think they've made some not great choices, or maybe if Scott Fitzgerald made some not great choices, I don't really feel like I have the audacity to say that because I haven't read the novel. But there are certain things in the narrative and with Gatsby's decision making that don't necessarily make perfect sense. But even when that is the case, visually it is stunning. The soundtrack is very interesting because obviously this is not contemporaneous to our own life. But a lot of the soundtrack is contemporary music, and it's kind of weird to see these like flapper girls dancing to modern rap. I don't know if it's classed as modern rap. I'm not very knowledgeable about contemporary music. It may be apparently clear. But it's just a weird kind of mix of having a lot more modern songs against the backdrop of something that was set quite a long time ago. So it's a very interesting dichotomy between the two of them, but it works. On paper, it shouldn't work, but it does. Not that I particularly like the songs. Largely not my kind of music, but with the action that's on screen, it actually works quite well. Great Gatsby is one that obviously I was quite nervous about watching because it's very well received, critically well received. Audiences seem to have loved it. It's won 52 awards. It's won 50 awards, including the 2 Oscars. It won Best Achievement in Costume Design for Catherine Martin. Yes, please. Absolutely stunning costumes. And Best Achievement in Production Design for Catherine Martin and Beverly Dunn. Beverly Dunn for set decoration. Completely agree. Absolutely, completely agree with both of those wins. It is visually stunning. The outfits, the set designs, the props, the decor, everything. Can't take your eyes away from it. It's just unfortunate that the narrative, the development of the narrative, some of Gatsby's behaviours, and indeed just the length of it and the fact that they could have cut down quite a lot and kept the narrative flowing a little bit better, would have made it, I think, a contender for the Best Picture. Kind of surprised it wasn't nominated for Best Picture, actually. But I enjoyed it. I completely see why there's so much hype surrounding The Great Gatsby. Completely understand why it's won so many awards. It's not my favourite. It's not my all-time favourite film. Will I watch it again? I don't know if I'll ever watch the whole film again, because it is long, and as I said, the narrative's not perfect. But certainly there are scenes in this that I'd like to experience again. If you haven't seen it, definitely give it a go. I promise there are reasons why it's so popular. It's definitely got an awful lot going for it.